Hey guys, hope you're having a great day. Make sure you're following along with these notes. Make sure you're putting them in the guided notes. And just like I had said, sometimes the things I say are important too. So don't just follow along with the PowerPoint. Make sure you add some of the things that I say. I will be checking your notes on Friday, so just be sure they're all set for Friday so I can check them and give you credit for them. Also, I haven't been giving you a ton of assignments lately. So if you're missing anything, really now's the time to work on that as we're doing notes, okay? If you have any questions, always reach out to me. So let's chat about, oh my gosh, so the Battle of Britain, right? We said Churchill refused to run away from the Nazis. And because of that, Hitler will decide that Britain is just not worth his efforts. So he's going to actually focus on Africa. Now remember, Africa, the northern part of Africa is pretty close to Europe. So he wants to try and get access to the Suez Canal and all of those things that Africa can offer. So he decides, you know what, England, you're not worth my time. Let me focus on Africa. So he decides when he does this to give Italy, now remember, Italy and Mussolini are his ally, and they're helping fight the war as well on Hitler's side on the Axis powers, right? So it says, Mussolini, my buddy, I'm giving you the opportunity, since you've already attacked in Ethiopia and won, to continue attacking in Africa for our goal. And I want you to attack Egypt, specifically because we're looking to have access to the Suez Canal. So in the northern part of Italy, we're going to see the English send their troops to fight in Africa, to defend Africa and Egypt. Now remember, the British have a lot to gain by keeping the Suez Canal free of Nazi control, right? Because they're a country who depends on trade. So the British just do not want the Nazis and Mussolini, for that matter, to take over Africa. So they will send a lot of their forces down there and fight in Africa against the Italians. And the British are very successful. So Hitler, he's like ticked off. He's like, Mussolini, I've only given you one job to do and you can't even do it. Move over, let me do it myself. So the Nazis will take control over the war in Africa, and Hitler is going to send one of his big guns into Africa, a guy named Erwin Rommel. Now, Erwin Rommel, with his troop known as the Afrika Korps, are sent to fight the British in Africa. And I have to tell you, Erwin Rommel is a force to be reckoned with. He's given the nickname the Desert Fox because of how incredibly sly and slick and strategic he is when fighting the British. He's fairly successful in Africa. In fact, Egypt will at one point will constantly be sort of tossed back and forth between the Nazis and the English, depending on battles that they're fighting in Africa. So Erwin Rommel is very successful in Africa. And this actually allows Hitler to gain access to other land that he didn't have access to. I'm going to just back up a second so you could see, right? So over here, he's fighting over in here, and this gives him access to this territory over here where you see Greece is. Do you guys remember what that territory is called in Europe? It's known as the Balkans. Now remember, World War I, the Balkans, that's where most of the focus of the war started, right? Remember the whole thing with Sarajevo and the shooting of Franz Ferdinand, right? So when he has access to those lands, he goes in and he takes over the Balkans. Now you can't attack the Balkans without the Soviets getting angry, because remember we said what type of ethnicity is found in the Balkans. Remember us talking about the Slavs in World War I? Well, who's like the mother Slav? That's Russia. Well, now it's the USSR. And who controls the USSR? Well, Stalin does. And do you remember that Stalin and Hitler signed a pact, right? The non-aggression pact. But were both convinced that they were going to follow this pact? No, of course not. And we know Hitler wants to take over the USSR. He now has access to going in and taking over the USSR. Now, there's been other people in history to try and take over the USSR or Russia. And you might remember Napoleon tried to do this. And how did Napoleon do? He stunk it up, if you remember. Remember we talked about how he went in with like 600,000 troops and he left with only 10,000, right? So Hitler, who again has a military mind, says, well, let me learn from Napoleon's mistakes. Well, right, Napoleon had his hardest time in the winter. So Hitler thinks, well, why don't I go in the spring? Because winter is over and it will be helpful. Well, unfortunately, and what we can learn from Napoleon and Hitler is that you should just never try and take over the USSR. It's just not possible. You will not succeed. So let's talk about what Hitler tried to do. So he named his invasion of the USSR Operation Barbarossa. Barbarossa means red beard, and it actually is a throwback to an old German king named Barbarossa who took over lands in Russia. So he's like dredging up this German nationalism with this Barbarossa guy, right? So it's called Operation Barbarossa, and here's his plan. He's like, this is what we're going to do. This Stalin fellow, I don't think that he is one to be trusted. So I'm going to invade the USSR. This is Hitler. And I'm going to try and take over 3 specific spots in the USSR. And he's going to head to the north, to the middle, and to the south. I'm going to show you a map of this in a moment. But when he invades in, you see this, the spring. Again, just like he was sort of saying with Napoleon, I can't go in the winter, it's too tough for my troops. What he doesn't know is that the spring is called the muddy season in the USSR. And can you get tanks and people and all sorts of equipment through mud? No, you can't. And so it was a major failure. In fact, like I had said, he used a 3-prong attack. And, so he's going to head towards Leningrad, he's going to head towards the middle, and then he's going to head south toward the Ural River. And there he is going to be met with a ton of resistance from the Russians. Now, if you remember, the Soviets had set up their quote-unquote buffer lands, right? Like, oh, we're just going to take this to protect ourselves from the Nazis, right? And these are some of the places that they're attacking. So in this 3-prong attack, like I said, he's going to be met with a ton of resistance. The Soviets refuse to allow the Nazis to take their land. In fact, Hitler puts a ton of effort on the Soviets, specifically in Stalingrad. And I want you to think about that for a moment. So grad means city, right? So this is Stalin's city. So if the Nazis were to take over Stalingrad, it's not just important for the Nazis, but it's also like symbolic, right? They're taking over Stalin's city. So Stalin is just like, I am not going to allow this guy to take my city. And he puts in millions of dollars and millions of people in Stalingrad to try and protect it. The place was decimated. I mean, nobody was even living there anymore. The buildings were torn down. The cities were, the roads were crumbled. And it went on for almost an entire year. 1 million Soviets died just in that city alone. But in the end, they held the city. Because I think Stalin recognizes, right, if Stalingrad goes down, then what's the point of trying to keep people fighting for the USSR, right? He's like, I'm our leader, and if Stalingrad goes down, then we all go down. So he held the city, and after a while, Hitler was like, I just can't continue putting all of my technology and my money and my men fighting for some city that's totally ruined. So he actually leaves. He retreats out of the USSR. So right now, he kind of lost, but he won't admit, the Battle of Britain. Right, he's still fighting in Africa, and now he's sort of seeing the cracks in his plan because the Soviets also wouldn't let him take over their territory. So I want to show you a video clip of, all right, so again, this is sort of like where the Nazis are, and here's the Soviets pushing them back, right? So this is the extension of the Nazi regime at the time. And there's Switzerland, who won't get involved. So anyway, so these are the places, right? So you got Great Britain and now the Soviets, right? The Soviets are now involved. Stalin was staying away. He was keeping away, but now Hitler forced his hand to get involved. So I want to show you a video clip of a movie that's amazing, and you should watch it because it's amazing. It's called Enemy at the Gates, and it's about the Battle of Stalingrad. So if you're interested in this stuff, definitely take a moment to watch. Get your parents' permission because there's a little bit of a scene that's a little inappropriate. So just get your parents' permission for that. Anyway, so this guy right here, so this is Jude Law, is actually a true person, is a real person in the story of Enemy at the Gates. His name is Vasily Zaitsev. And Vasily Zaitsev is a marksman and becomes a sniper for the Soviet cause. So I want to show you, he's just getting off the train and he's being forced into the Battle of Stalingrad. So I wanted to show you what this battle was like for the Soviets. Okay. So they literally just got off of the train and now they're in battle. And those are the Soviets shooting, forcing their soldiers to rush onto the boats to get across the Volga, which is the river, into Stalingrad. So you don't just fear the Nazis, you fear your own people. You're worried they're going to shoot you.
Listen to these letters sent by Russian mothers to their sons on the front. Volodya, my child, I know that it's for our motherland.
So he's trying to stir up nationalism to get these guys to fight while they're being bombed by the Luftwaffe.
Everyone here knows that you will not fall back. Everyone here is proud of you. Your father's dead. Your brothers are dead. Avenge us on the horns of fascists.
So now these poor men are getting shot at by the Luftwaffe trying to escape, and now they're getting shot by their own people for being a traitor. That's Stalingrad. So this is communism for you, all right? They have more men than they do weapons. So they're sending 50% of their soldiers into battle without a weapon. He didn't get one. He got some bullets. So I hope you got a chance to understand how significant that battle was. To be in that battle, to be a soldier in Stalingrad, it was incredibly difficult. And what are you doing? You're basically saving the name for a city. But really, Stalin felt like it was necessary. And these poor people had to suffer right under the Nazis for this. But in the end, Hitler retreated, right? So these are the things that I guess we have to do against somebody like Hitler and the Nazis. So that story that you were just watching, like I said, is actually based on a true story of a real person who fought in Stalingrad that ended up shooting a bunch of officers. So I would highly suggest, if you have nothing to do this weekend, check it out. Anyway, make sure you're adding these to your notes. We'll continue tomorrow talking about the war. Reach out if you have any questions, and we'll hopefully see you soon.